Hello, everyone. Uh, I'm assuming you can hear me fine.
Yeah,
If
we
you
can
can't
both
hear me
hear you
fine,
and
yeah.
see the screen.
Okay, that's great. So, I'm going to give a talk about the epigraphy of the Peloponnesian War. And I thought this would be aimed at approximately those people who are taking ancient history or classical civilization for A level. I'm aware that the Peloponnesian War plays some part in the specifications for ancient history A level, but this may be of interest to other people as well. So um, I'm or the I'm described at the University of Manchester as a professor of Greek history and epigraphy. And epigraphy, as you may well know, is the study of writing on hard surfaces, such as stone or marble or metal. And I'm going to be asking today how the epigraphy of this era, of the era from about 431 to 404 BC, helps us understand the society of Athens and other city-states during the Peloponnesian War. But I wanted to give you a little introduction to the study of epigraphy, first of all, and I think it's worth remembering that epigraphy, or the use of inscriptions for writing, was one of several types of writing used in ancient Greece. So the Greeks, on the whole, didn't commit long poems like the Iliad to pieces of marble or stone. Um, Inscriptions were used in public contexts in ancient Greece for a variety of reasons, often to commemorate the dead, sometimes to record public transactions. And they clearly thought quite hard about what type of stone they were going to use to record public transactions. Inscriptions that survive into the modern day are often inscribed on marble, which is a hard stone that is, at least in a Greek climate anyway, long lasting. Um, and I'm going to come back to this particular example of an inscription shortly. Athens and Attica was very lucky in that the Athenians had access to good sources of high quality marble, and in particular to the northeast of the city. Mount Pendeli was a very important supply source of marble, of quality marble, and also to the southeast of the city, Mount Imitos was also an excellent supplier of marble. The Athenians went to great lengths to extract marble in these quarries, using a number of different skills to cut the marble out of the quarries, stone blocks. So cracks would be opened up in the stone, and then wooden levers would be hammered into place. Then water would be poured onto those pieces of wood, which would then expand and crack the marble so that it could be extracted in large blocks. The Athenians took great care to transport this marble without damaging it excessively. The 6 miles or so from Pendeli down to central Athens, sometimes using a specially constructed track. It's not always clear how well prepared the pieces of marble were before they were removed to the quarries. You can see on this particular, on the reconstruction by Corres on the bottom right, the column base is already prepared, but that may not always have been the case. The stone was cut into blocks and then stored until it could be used. And here are some modern analogies with that process from Greece. The Greeks, as modern people do too, use metal chisels and punches to write things down, to carve letters on hard surfaces. And this was a very skilled process, and we know that by the Hellenistic period at least, letter cutters sometimes charged per letter or per line for the inscriptions they were making, rather like modern stonemasons do today. So inscriptions in ancient Greece were used for a range of purposes, for writing down laws and decrees, and we should highlight that they didn't write down all of their public decisions or laws or decrees on stone. They selected ones that they thought would be particularly important or profitable to write down. They, in particular, wrote down awards for individuals, honorific decrees on stone, as part of a reward for somebody who had contributed something to a community. The Athenians, in particular, were keen on writing down financial accounts and inventories on stone, perhaps to present them before the eyes of the gods, or perhaps to present their officials as accountable. Sacred texts and calendars are another important category of Athenian inscription, although it's one that I won't be talking about today. Commemoration of the dead is something, obviously, that in times of war is an important use of inscriptions. But in an important way, all inscriptions were gifts to the gods. They seem to have a religious function, whatever their human or secular function was. Inscriptions are used then in public and private contexts, though most of the contexts that I'm going to be talking about shortly are public ones. But I think one of the things that many of the inscriptions that survive today have in common, especially those on marble, is that they were put on public display. They were written so that many people could see them. When we're referring to inscriptions in our work today, in whether that be in books or articles or exam scripts, we make use of modern publications of inscriptions. For your purposes, or for the purposes of those people who are studying 5th century Greek history, most important book now is that by Osborne and Rhodes, Greek Historical Inscriptions 478 to 404 BC, and we refer to this book as OR after the surnames of the authors. But if you don't have the opportunity to get access to that book, then there's no need to despair, because the Attic Inscriptions Online project is slowly but steadily translating inscriptions bit by bit, and of the 20,000 ancient Athenian inscriptions that survive into the modern day, about 2,000 of them, more than 2,000 of them now, are translated on Attic Inscriptions Online, and that's something that anyone with internet access can look at. And you can browse it and search it. So if you were interested in a particular word or term for an essay or for a project, you could put it into, actually not the reference lookup that I've got here, but into the search function and see what type of inscriptions came up. We've also got an Attic Inscriptions Online YouTube channel, which hosts short videos about particular inscriptions. You can see there on that screenshot, it had only 86 subscribers. Today it's got a few more. It's got at least 87 subscribers. Worth looking at anyway. So, for the rest of this talk, I want to ask what inscriptions tell us about the Peloponnesian War. And the thing that I want to highlight is that they tell us about the mentalities of the communities that were involved in the fighting. They don't tell us much about the type of spears that they were using, how many people were involved in war, but they tell us a lot, or they give us insights rather, into the mentalities of the parties involved in war. So the first sense in which inscriptions give us insight into the Peloponnesian War is the way that, in showing us some of the ways in which communities reacted to victory, by showing off about those victories and thanking the deities for their role in those victories. Because Greek communities were very keen, after something good had happened or after a victorious battle, to show that they were grateful to the gods for supporting them in those battles. And there are two particularly good examples that we can look at after the defeat of the Spartans at Pylos in 425 BC, which is a very important point in the war described by Thucydides. And there are two inscriptions I'd like to point you towards. One is the inscribed bronze shield from the Athenian Agora, which was discovered in the 20th century and is thought to have been one of the 120 shields captured by the Athenians from the Spartans at the Battle of Pylos in the middle of the 420s. Now, the later traveller Pausanias reports that shields captured by the Athenians from the Spartans were displayed in the Agora in the painted stoa. But this particular shield was discovered in as where it was being reused as a cistern lid at some time, where it was reused probably before 300 BC. So it wasn't among those that Pausanias saw, but it really backs up the idea that the Athenians did display captured shields in their agora. And they added the inscription, the Athenians making the dedication, we understand, from the Spartans at Pylos. It's not just the Athenians who, during the Peloponnesian War, made dedications in the shape of inscribed objects. The Messenians, who were the subjugated group, the group subjugated in the Peloponnese by the Spartans, were also very happy with their defeat of the Spartans after the exploits on the island of Sphacteria, close or in the Bay of Navarino, just off Pylos. They were so pleased about this that they set up a statue of Nike, representing victory in battle, as a tithe from the spoils taken from the enemy, dedicating it at the sanctuary of Zeus at Olympia as a gift to Zeus for having supported them during the battle. And the inscription on the base of this particular Nike is interesting, because according to Pausanias, writing in the 2nd century AD, the Messenians made this dedication to thank the gods, but they didn't dare inscribe the name of the enemy because they were afraid of the Lacedaemonians or the Spartans. So the Messenians get the best of both worlds. They thank the gods, but they show off that they've been victorious, but they try to avoid naming their enemies. It's not quite making faces at the Spartans, but at least signifying to a Pan-Hellenic sanctuary that they have won a victory. Another sense of the Peloponnesian War that we get from the inscriptions is the sense of the importance of finances. And this is something that crops up occasionally in our literary sources like Thucydides, but isn't always there. The Athenians, you probably know, from 454 BC, from the middle of the 5th century BC, extracted from their subject states a sum of money in the shape of coined silver, a sort of tax or tribute on their allies. they dedicated 1/60th of the total of this money every year to the treasury of the deity Athena. And they wrote these sums of money, the 1/60ths, down on stone slabs, which they set up in Athens, probably on the Acropolis. We can see from this slide the detail to which the Athenians went in these descriptions. So here they're recording that the Olynthians paid 500, or the treasurer of Athena took 500 drachmae from the Olynthians. To understand the full amount of the tribute that the Athenians took from the Olynthians, we would have to multiply that 500 drachmas by 60. I like this inscription in particular because it gives us a sense of the way in which the Athenians wrote down their sums, their numbers on inscriptions. I don't have time to go into the details of that, but it's something which is really interesting to look at in more detail. The inscriptions of Athens also tell us about how, over the course of the Peloponnesian War, the Athenians tightened up tribute collection. Cleinias made a decree in about 4254 or later, which gave details about how the Athenians would record the sums of tribute that were received each year from their allies, as a way of trying to make sure that the allies coughed up and, of course, supported the Athenian war effort in this way. And towards the end of the Peloponnesian War, we have growing evidence that the Athenians were drawing on sacred reserves to support their war effort. So an inscription now at the British Museum records payments made from the treasury of the goddess Athena to support expeditions like that, supporting the rebel satrap Amorges. And it's not just the Athenians who were interested in recording their financial position or contributions towards the war effort on stone. An 18th century traveller came across, when he went to Sparta, the Spartan, or a list of Spartan contributions, or contributions rather, to Sparta, made by their allies. This is a very scrappy inscription, and not a patch on the monumental marble inscriptions of the Athenians, but it gives us a sense that the Spartans too were interested in raising money and recording the money and contributions raised on stone. Although the contributions made by some of Sparta's allies weren't quite as impressive as some of those of the Athenians, they included things like bags of raisins. Every little helps, I suppose. The third sense in which we get of the Athenians during the Peloponnesian War is the way that the Athenians wrote down their decisions, or the decisions of the Democratic Assembly, on stone. The democracy of the 5th century, the functioning of the democracy of the 5th century, involved Athenian citizen males making proposals and voting on decisions which would then be put into effect. Some of these were written down on stone, and they give us an insight into the directions and policy which were followed by the Athenians. Sometimes these affected the religious offerings of the Athenians and other communities. So here the Athenians are, before the Peloponnesian War, in fact, regulating the offering of first fruits of Athenian crops at Eleusis, and also not ordering but urging their allies to also offer first fruits to Demeter and Kore at Eleusis. A bit later on, some 10 years later, probably intervening in the affairs of their allies by imposing Athenian standards, by which I mean silver coins, weights and measures on their subject states. This was an inscription or a decree which was sent out to be inscribed right across the empire, and was one that the comic playwright Aristophanes made fun of in his play The Birds. And also the Athenians wrote down on stone their alliances with other city-states. Here they are in 420 BC, after the Peace of Nicias, making an alliance with the Argives, the Eleans, and the Mantineans of the Peloponnese, making an alliance which guaranteed that anyone who picked on the Athenians would face the opposition of the Argives, the Mantineans, and the Eleans, and anybody who picked on the Argives, the Mantineans, and the Eleans would face the wrath of the Athenians, a sort of NATO of the late 420s BC. In this particular passage, they don't mention their collective enemy, the Spartans, but it's pretty clear that this is a alliance against the Spartans. The last sense, very briefly, I want to highlight in which inscriptions give us an insight into Athenian mentalities during the Peloponnesian War is in terms of the way that they commemorated their dead. During the Peloponnesian War, the Athenians, from time to time, perhaps annually, set up casualty lists, giving the names of those who had died in battles for a particular year. This is a monument set up commemorating those Athenians who had died probably during the Sicilian expedition from the Erectaid tribe of the Athenians. And it really gives us a sense of the community aspect of Athenian mourning for their war dead. So just to conclude very briefly then, I think inscriptions are important and useful pieces of evidence because they give us insight into Athenian and other Greek mentalities during the Peloponnesian War. They give us a sense of the communities that functioned. They give us a sense of the ways in which they mourned the dead, and they also give us a strong sense of the importance of religion to the Athenians as they made their public decisions. So that's everything that I'd planned to say. I'm very happy to try to answer any questions.